These thieves thought they were just stealing mushrooms from an ordinary mountain, but they had no idea that this forest already belonged to a reincarnated druid. At first, everything looked easy for them. They slipped into the back mountain, pulled out valuable mushrooms, and acted like they had done this many times before. One of them even scolded his partner for harvesting the mushrooms too roughly because damaging them would lower their price. To them, this mountain was nothing but a free treasure chest filled with herbs, roots, and rare mushrooms. But then, something strange happened. The forest became silent. Wild animals started gathering around them, staring at them like they were waiting for an order. The thieves froze, but their greed was stronger than their fear. Instead of running away, they kept trying to steal more. That was their biggest mistake, because behind the scenes, Sihyun was watching everything through Orin, the giant pine tree he had turned into the heart of his territory. Using the tree as his eyes and ears, he connected with every living thing in the forest. The animals, the fog, the vines, and even the mountain itself began moving under his command. These thieves had stolen from the wrong person. The moment Sihyun decided to punish them, the peaceful mountain turned into a nightmare. Fog swallowed the forest. Animals charged from every direction. The thieves screamed, begged, and ran for their lives, but there was nowhere to escape. To finish the lesson, Sihyun summoned vines from the ground and trapped them completely. By the time the village chief and police arrived, the thieves were already beaten by fear. They tried to claim that demons and trees attacked them, but no one believed their ridiculous story. After all, they were not facing a demon. They were facing a druid who could make the entire forest fight for him. So how did he end up in this body in the first place? In ancient times, there was a tribe known as the Druids, and they protected harmony and order. They were revered among humans because of how pure they are. Among them is our MC, Theophilo, who has lived a long life of pure soul and eventually entered the cycle of rebirth. He started wandering the cosmos, searching for a compatible vessel, and after a long time, he finally found a vessel worthy of him. He was a vessel who was fragile as a giant glass ball filled with pain, but still perfect. Tired of waiting around, Theophilo finally inhabits the chosen vessel, which is a dying man, Kang Sihyun. By the time he opens his eyes, he sees a young man crying beside him, calling him brother, and the pungent smell coming from the room hits him really hard. It turns out that it is a hospital, and he has awakened in the body of an overweight young man. He immediately figures out that there is a lot wrong with the body. The young man standing beside him continues speaking to him, and even though he had never heard the language before, it somehow registers in his brain, and he naturally understands. At the same time, he is surprised that the memories of the vessel he chose still remain upon reincarnation, but everything became even more intense when he locked eyes with Sihyun's brother, Siwoo. The moment this happened, Sihyun's memories flooded into his head, causing him to grab his head in pain while screaming out. Everything from who he was down to the pain he was suffering from flooded his brain all at once. He even saw the way he met his end and the entire journey of his life. After he is done inheriting the memories, he passes out and only wakes up after a while. Even though it was weird that Sihyun's memories came flooding back, our guy takes joy in the fact that he doesn't have to struggle to adapt to the modern world. Even though he has accepted his fate as Sihyun, the body he inherited is totally unexpected. It was an overweight body of 170 kilograms and a huge 50-inch waist. Apparently, the reason Sihyun died at 28 was a myocardial infarction and complications from hyperlipidemia. Now that Theophilo has taken his body as its vessel, he promises himself that he will make the body fit, and by this, he starts jogging while he is still inside the hospital. Theophilo knows that once his body becomes fit, it will be the perfect vessel, and he is also not worried about taking the hard route because in his past life, he could have starved for a week without dying, so he is already used to the hard life. However, there is one problem, and this is the fact that the nature force he is able to gather is very low compared to what he is used to. In fact, it is so low that everything he gathered throughout the whole day can only bloom into a single flower. Basically, nature force is the source of mysterious power that is wielded by druids, and it is also the driving force that keeps Sihyun alive. Even though he manages to gather nature force, it scatters in no time, and this is a problem for him, who is a druid. Sihyun is resting on a public bench, thinking of how he can fix things up when his brother shows up, scolding him for already stressing himself out when he just woke up. Sihyun tries telling him that he is fine, but Siwoo insists that his heart is weak, so he is supposed to be resting. Siwoo sits down with him and tells him that the kid he saved is 6 years old. Apparently, in Sihyun's last act, he had thrown his body in front of a kickboard flying down the hill like a rocket. Even though he hurt himself in saving the child and was in critical condition, there was a sense of relief in him. It was after this that he collapsed from a myocardial infarction just after saving the child. Sihyun teases his brother, telling him that he saved the child because he was cute. Siwoo covers his face to hide how proud he is as he tells his brother he did a really good thing. However, he urges him to be careful because the moment he is gone, he has no one else. Hearing his brother speak this way fills his heart with joy, which he hasn't felt in a while. Nonetheless, Si-hyun concludes that getting healthy is the priority. Just then, Si-hyun shocks Si-woo, telling him that he has already quit his job, and this forces Si-woo to ask him why he would do such a thing. Si-hyun replies that the team leader stole the project he spent months working on. Si-woo hears this and yells in rage because he knows that the culprit is a spoiled rich brat. He finally understands why Si-hyun was so stressed, and Si-hyun just reacts to this casually. Si-woo is surprised that Si-hyun is not crashing out, and Si-hyun replies that he has just accepted things as they are. Si-woo then suggests that he take a break to rest and do nothing, but Si-hyun reveals his plan to move to the countryside. He says he is moving to the outskirts of Gyeonggi-do to start farming. Si-woo is shocked to hear this, as he knows that farming is a little bit demanding. Si-hyun replies that he is not going there to farm, but to focus on his health, which is basically a way for him to recuperate. Si-woo is not entirely surprised, since Si-hyun has always liked growing plants, which means he can use the opportunity to tend to a small garden for exercise. From Theophilo's perspective, he also needed a forest to make sure he was able to stabilize his vessel. Theophilo is a druid, and not having a nature force doesn't sit right with him. Just then, his brother suggests that he start filming for YouTube again, reminding him that his old plant channel is still active. Si-hyun replies that he is not entirely interested, but Si-woo insists, reminding him that he used to do it every time. In fact, he lets him know that people are still leaving comments, asking him where he went. In Si-hyun's defense, he claims that doing too many things at once is nothing but a waste of energy. Si-woo then tells him that he is only worried about what he is going to be doing all by himself when he is stuck in the countryside. Si-woo then uses his cute face to ask his brother to at least upload some of his simple videos, even if it is just for him. Seeing how cute his brother is, Si-hyun finds it hard to say no to the request, and he eventually agrees, telling Si-woo that he would do it. However, he tells him that he won't show his face and will only upload whenever he feels like it, so it is going to be like a diary of sorts. Si-woo assures him that just uploading is more than enough for him, and they are in the middle of this when a lady, Ah-young, shows up on the scene, calling Si-hyun's name. The moment he locks eyes with the lady, his breath ceases, which is an involuntary reaction from his body, which tells him that Si-hyun really loves whoever she is. However, at the same time, Theophilo's instincts were screaming a warning even though he was staring at a woman Si-hyun loved, because, in Si-hyun's memories, she was a freaking snake. Even though Si-hyun had loved her, she exploited this weakness and made sure to use Si-hyun for her heavy-duty task. In fact, she made sure she pinned any mistake she made on Si-hyun. And even though Si-hyun is aware that she is a terrible person, he continued tolerating her trashy behavior. Seeing that his brother has a visitor, Si-woo backs off, telling him that he will see him later. He then walks off so that the two can have the chance to talk. And after his brother's departure, Si-hyun takes a deep breath before asking Ah-young what brings her to the hospital. Ah-young is stunned by the question, and she starts to stutter. This is shocking to her because Si-hyun had always looked at her with sweet eyes while making sure he spoke kindly to her. It is very evident that she is shocked by his sudden coldness, and after she manages to speak, she tells Si-hyun that she is there because the core of the project is missing. Ah-young wastes no time putting the blame on Si-hyun, saying it was a project he worked on, but little does she know that she is not talking to the Si-hyun she knew anymore. Si-hyun casually replies to her, telling her that he doesn't remember what she is talking about, revealing that he went through a major surgery, which has caused him to lose memory of a few things. Ah-young freaks out, urging Si-hyun to try to remember, since it is pretty important. Si-hyun drops a shocker on her, telling her that the project is not important to him, while revealing that he has already dropped his resignation letter, so it is basically not his project anymore. Ah-young is shocked when she hears this, as she knows that the whole situation doesn't speak well for her. She then resorts to her usual antics by trying to act cute in front of Si-hyun, telling him that she's going to be in a lot of trouble if he doesn't help. This only increases his level of disgust for her because he doesn't believe that she is trying to pull such a shameless trick again. The level of disgust on his face is pronounced, and Theophilo realizes that Si-hyun has terrible taste when it comes to women. Si-hyun then speaks up, telling Ah-young that he is going to let the fact that she used him slide, letting her know that he is aware of what she was doing. He mentions how she dumped all of her work on him, while even pinning mistakes on him. Ah-young is taken aback as she tries to understand what is happening in front of her, but Si-hyun only makes things worse for her. He tells her that coming to him when he had already submitted his resignation letter is the lowest of the low that she can go to as a person. Ah-young tries to defend her claim, saying she only came to him because he is the person in charge, but Si-hyun corrects her, telling her that he is no longer the person in charge. Ah-young loses it and finally reveals her true self, groaning at Si-hyun, telling him that she only did it because she was worried about him. Si-hyun is glad that she finally showed her true colors, and he figures out that it is important she sever the karmic traits between her and Si-hyun, since he is now Theophilo, not Si-hyun. After giving her what she deserves, Sihyun gets up, telling Ayung that she is now free to leave because they have nothing else to discuss. Ayung tries to speak, but Sihyun urges her to send whatever she wants to say via text. As he walks away, Ayung screams at him sarcastically, wishing him a speedy recovery, but Sihyun knows truly well that she doesn't mean well for him. Nonetheless, he doesn't care because what he just did should have told her that he doesn't want anything to do with her again. In addition, he plans to ignore every call from the company since he has a mountain of work to do and he can't allow them to hold him back. And with this, Sihyun continues with his daily life at the hospital, making sure he exercises every day. His dedication was so impressive that those who used to frown at him even started to cheer him on, and the moment word got out that Siwoo, his brother, is a famous idol, more people began to show him kindness. They serve him all sorts of dishes made from veggies and fruits. Sihyun once tasted a sweet berry that sent him into another realm of pleasure as the fruit dissolved in his mouth. The nurses and patients in the room are surprised at how he is reacting to a berry. They tease him for acting as if it is his first time, but little do they know that it is actually his first time. Sihyun just lies to them that it's been a very long time since he has had fruit, and this is because, compared to what he ate during his time as a druid, modern-day food items tasted like heaven. As he eats the strawberry, he sees himself walking through a druid garden. Sihyun even comes to a halt at some point, staring at the berry in his hand, forcing them to ask him if dirt is on the fruit, but he replies that he is staring at it this way because it is too delicious. As he consumes more, he finally realizes that the fruit's nature force is being absorbed into his body. Sihyun is surprised by this because he never thought he would be able to absorb nature force just by eating, and this only gives him more push to move to the countryside. After some time, the day of his discharge finally arrives, and he is seen off by the grandma who shared a room with him in the hospital. The old woman commends him for being so resilient, saying she has never seen someone who managed to lose 20 kilograms in just 3 weeks. Nonetheless, she lets him know that he still has a long way to go for his health, and Sihyun assures the woman that he will. He thanks the woman for worrying about him, and he wishes the old woman a speedy recovery. As he touches the old lady's hand, he passes on a ton of nature force into her body, and even though this won't cure her instantly, it would at least help her. The old woman compliments his smile, telling him to make sure he never lets go of his smile because seeing him smile also makes her feel good. Just then, the old woman remembers that Sihyun sold his house, and she asks him where he is headed, and he replies that he has decided to move to the countryside to recuperate. He says he wants a quiet place where he doesn't have to worry about the city, and the old woman recommends the White Tiger Mountain to him. Soon afterwards, Sihyun arrives at the old house where he will be living on the mountain. After clearing weeds for a while, Sihyun heads to the market to do some shopping because he has plans to buy things that he needs. The moment he sets foot in the market, he is blown away by how lively it is. It was more or less a feast of scents and colors, like a miniature version of a big city festival. He also gets to find out that a 5-day market doesn't mean it opens on the 5th, but it means that it opens every 5 days. Just then, he comes across the market snacks that he saw in his vessel's memories, and he starts salivating, hoping that he can get his hands on them. One of the snack sellers sees him staring hard, and she urges him to get some, but he rushes off to avoid temptation, telling her that he is fine. Sihyun is determined to get his body back in shape, no matter what it takes. Moments later, he makes his way into a seed and plant shop, where he meets the seller, an old man. The man asks him what he wants, and he points to the tomato seedlings, saying he wants them. The man is surprised, and he asks him why he is interested in tomatoes. He replies that he really likes tomato plants, and he tells the man to add some vegetable seedlings for wraps and salads. In fact, he wants one of every seed that the man has in the shop, leaving the man completely shocked. After this, he asks him if he has grapevines, and the man leads him to where the vines are, saying he has some 5-year vines, which are 60,000 won. Just then, the man calls his attention to the fact that it is already too late to be planting. He lets Sihyun know that a tomato will grow fast if he plants it right, but he is more worried if the seeds will even sprout since it is a hot season. The old man tells him that he is buying so much and his conscience wouldn't let him stay quiet. Sihyun is impressed by the old man's sincerity, and he tells him not to worry, assuring him that he will be fine. He is a druid after all, and he has nothing to worry about. The store owner is pleased to hear that he still wants to buy, even with the risks, but he tells him not to complain to him later. Sihyun starts packing everything he has bought, and after he is done, he bids the man farewell. Just then, the man sees him branching out to other stores, getting other necessities for himself. The old man freaks out at the idea that he is trying to carry everything by himself. To help out, the store owner assisted him in moving his supplies to his house because there was no way he would have been able to fit everything he bought on a bicycle. He obviously doesn't know this, since he is an ignorant druid. After offloading everything, he packs all the supplies in a corner so he can finish pulling the weeds. He's in the middle of this when a strange man shows up in his yard with a gun tucked behind him. Sihyun is stunned as the stern-looking old man speaks to him, expressing his surprise that this is the first time he has seen him around. The old man asks him if he is planning on living there, and Sihyun is too stunned to answer. After the whole weird first encounter, the man ends up helping him in his garden. The man tells him that he has to fix the fence and the gate because it might currently be warm, but he has to prepare for winter or else he is going to suffer. It turns out that the stern-looking old man is his neighbor, Jong. Apparently, Jong had come to check out the big guy who moved into the house below the mountain. He ended up sharing all sorts of tips for country living with Sihyun, and since a druid never turns away a teacher, Sihyun makes sure to listen attentively to everything the old man has to offer. At the same time, Jong is surprised that Sihyun is just a big softy when he already assumed that he would be scary, since he is built like a mountain. In addition, he is impressed that he listens to his elders, and he decides that he will check on him more often, since he is new to the country. An hour later, the two had sorted the yard, and just then, Jong noticed something weird. He realizes that he is not smoking, which is really weird. This is because he smoked for so long that he usually coughs whenever he stands up, and Sihyun asks him if he has quit. Jong replies that he is already trying his best to stay off, but he is still surprised that he hasn't coughed. And little does he know that his system is getting filtered thanks to being around Sihyun. Later that day, Sihyun sits down to watch a health video on YouTube. The doctor advises his viewers to fill 50% of their meal with vegetables, then 30% protein and 20% carbohydrates. He adds that it is best to choose lean proteins like chicken breast or white fish, while revealing that following the right diet is the most important factor to lose weight. Sihyun listens attentively because druids are raised from a young age under the guidance and care of sages. In addition, his long training had taught him that there is something to learn from everyone. In this scenario, the internet was very useful, but there is also the issue of accuracy. He knows that he can only trust channels where experts put their names and careers on the line. He figures out that it is the result of knowledge accumulated over the ages. Just then, he hears a strange sound in the distance, which resembles a cry for help. He grabs a broom to defend himself, and he rushes to the fence where he finds a mother water deer with tears in her eyes. Sihyun drops the broom and he manages to get the deer to come in, comforting her, while assuring the crying mother that he will help her. After the mother deer calms down, Sihyun makes use of the wild resonance to achieve communion with the deer, and just then, the water deer's emotions begin to flow into him. Moments later, he finally realizes that the deer is crying for help because her baby deer has been caught in a trap and needs help. Sihyun then tells the deer to lead him to where the baby deer is. As they climb the mountain, Sihyun finds himself panting heavily, and this is because climbing the mountain in such an overweight body is exhausting. His breath became lower and his chest tightened as if his heart might burst. But even with this, he refuses to stop because no matter what, he has to save the baby deer as quickly as possible. After running for a while, they finally make it to where the baby deer is being held in a trap. Sihyun is worried when he sees the little deer because the wound is even deeper than he thought. He could see the bone outside and he could only hope that there was something useful nearby that he could use. Just then, he looks around and realizes that everything around him is violet. He was in so much haste that he didn't notice that the mountain's topography is pretty incredible. In fact, it holds an immense amount of nature force, and with this, he knows that what he needs must be around. He gets up to look around, and in no time, he finds the medicinal herb that he needs. Even though he doesn't know what kind of plant it is, he could see that it is emitting a violet aura, and he can just make up for whatever is lacking with his nature force. He places the herb on the affected area before combining it with his skill to generate a healing effect. Moments later, the healing effect takes effect, and the baby deer opens its eyes. Sihyun is glad that the trap was small, and he concludes that he will get himself wire cutters the next time he visits the market. Before he knows it, he realizes that it is already too late, and he has to return home, but then it dawns on him that the deer also has to go home. The next morning, Sihyun wakes up to exercise, and he follows a video lead which he barely finishes. He ends up crashing to the ground in exhaustion, and it turns out that he had brought the little deer back to his place the night before. He even gathered some nearby berries that are good for recovery, and he left them at the deer's side, hoping that it would recover without any issue. When he first got to the area, he had thought it was just an ordinary mountain like any other, but he never expected that he would find such a rich ecosystem and a violet aura colony there. Sihyun wishes that his druid teacher would see this because he would have been absolutely blown away. Because of how impressive the area is, Sihyun realizes that he is starting to fall in love with the place. Just then, it dawns on him that he is recording a YouTube video, which is about his morning stretching routine. After he is done with the video, he decides to go back to fixing the garden. He gets into his farming wear and he whips out the seeds he obtained from the market. He is glad that he is getting to show his skills once again. Being a druid, they receive training for decades from a young age, and when the time comes, they undergo a ritual to be chosen by nature. After this, they learn over and over again, which is a continuous path of hardship. With what he has seen in modern life, he realizes that people think of druids as some kind of fairies or dwarves, but to him, they are just a professional class. After hours of squatting to plant the seeds, Sihyun is left in pain, and this is still thanks to his body. He also remembers that he ran all the way to the top of the mountain the day before to save a deer. Nonetheless, he sees it as his responsibility to help the seeds grow, since he is a druid. As he continues planting, Sihyun enjoys every moment that comes with it because being a druid is the best job he can think of. After hours of working in the garden, Sihyun had finally finished planting, and he used his skill to immediately force the seeds to sprout, ultimately giving rise to a beautiful green garden. Sihyun stands there, watching his handiwork in amazement, while also recovering from his exhaustion. Sihyun stands there, wondering why the old lady is staring at him the way she is. When she finally speaks up, she addresses the bird sitting on his head, asking him if the bird is his pet, but it is the woman's words that make him realize that there is a crow sitting on his head. Jung expresses his surprise, saying that in all of his long life, he has never seen a crow sit down comfortably on someone's head. The village chief finally tells him that she is there to see if he is having any issues with the house, and Sihyun asks her what she means by this. She points out the fact that the house is run down, and she reveals that when she heard that a young man from Seoul was moving in, she confessed that she wondered if it might be uncomfortable for him. Sihyun is surprised when he realizes that the village chief only came to visit because she was worried. Sihyun was initially uncomfortable because of her sharp look, but it appears that she is a warm person. Sihyun tells the lady that the house needs some repairs, but there are no major issues, so he thanks her for checking on him. Just then, Jung notices that he has set up his garden, and Sihyun suggests that he take a look. Jung gets there, and he is left in shock that the things that he planted some days before had already sprouted that much. Sihyun quickly clears the air to avoid suspicion, saying he planted seedlings, and the old man replies that the seedlings must have been very healthy. Sihyun takes solace in the fact that he didn't lie, since the tomatoes and carrots were seedlings, while the grapes were saplings. The village chief expresses her surprise that Sihyun had planted all sorts of things when she was expecting a city boy like him to just grow lettuce. Sihyun tells the lady that he has to eat a lot of vegetables because he is looking to reduce his weight. The village chief then shocks him, telling him that he actually looks handsome as he is, so he must have girls lining up for him. Jung then asks him if there is anything else that he needs, and this question confuses Sihyun. Jung points out the fact that he is from the city, so it is obvious that he would know nothing about country life. He urges Sihyun not to struggle on his own, promising that he would help if he asks for it. Sihyun is glad that he asked, and he lets him know that he needs a favor. It turns out that the favor he needs is constructing a greenhouse, and the village chief wastes no time putting someone on it. Soon afterward, the structure is completed, leaving Sihyun completely blown away. Sihyun mentions that he is planning to grow various flowering plants, and some of them shouldn't be exposed to rain. Seeing how passionate he is about plants, the village chief figures out that he knows a lot about flowering plants, and she tells him that she has an orchid at her house that is wilting. She asks him if he would like to take a look at it whenever he is free, and he agrees to do so. Moments later, Jung suggests that they leave because his pet's feeding time is getting closer. As they are about to leave, the village chief urges Sihyun to work hard on his farming because it might bring in some good money for him. Sihyun thanks her for the advice and also wishes them a safe trip back to their place. With this, Sihyun got his own greenhouse and he takes his content creation more seriously. He wastes no time recording a video in the greenhouse, showcasing everything he has inside the greenhouse, while giving a detailed explanation of how he plans to tailor the sun's exposure to each plant's needs. He then pauses the recording to use his nature force to stimulate the activity of living organisms in the soil, forcing the earthworms and microbes to become active in an attempt to enrich the ground. Sihyun grabs a portion of the soil to examine it, and he is blown away by how active the soil is, which is something he has not seen in a while. In his past life, when he was a druid, he lived in the heart of an oak forest, which was closer to a vast plain of wide wheat fields, and the crops he was close to were olives, grapes, apples, and pears. However, the mountain is filled with rare edible mushrooms and has a lot of medicinal herbs. Sihyun is completely overwhelmed at the thought of growing so many different things. Since there is a limit to the things he can learn from the internet, he figures out that buying some books and starting to study properly will help him. Just then, he receives notifications from the video he posted, and surprisingly, they are all positive comments. Sihyun is completely blown away by this, since he never expected this kind of reaction from his viewers. He had thought people would not be interested in a personal and boring video, but as it stands, people are still drawn to a real story. It is as if they are experiencing the whole journey with him, and they are curious, while using his journey as motivation to change themselves. With how things have been going well for him, Sihyun has no choice but to admit that it is the right idea that he came to the countryside. The following morning, Sihyun checks his weight, and he is surprised to see that he has gone from 150 kilograms to 129 kilograms, which is a loss of 21 kilograms. In addition, his body is getting stronger even though he hasn't done much, and he figures out that if he keeps this up, he will regain his health in no time. He picks up his phone to record his daily vlog, revealing that he plans to water the garden, and after this, he will visit his neighbor's house because he said he has something to give him. He then tells his viewers that he would like to engage in a Q&A with them as he walks. The first question is how tall he is, and he replies that he is 183 centimeters tall, assuring them that it is accurate because he measured it at a hospital. Another viewer then asks him if he doesn't use pesticides because in his last video, he saw some bug bites on his perilla leaves. Sihyun replies that he doesn't like using pesticides or chemical sprays and would rather avoid them since he eats whatever he grows. However, he has plans to use the mint he is growing to keep the bugs away. He lets them know that mint gives off a scent that pests hate. As he approaches his destination, he ends the Q&A session, thanking them for their time. Suddenly, he hears a familiar cry in the distance, and this catches his attention. Just then, he sees Jong chasing down a water deer with his gun. From a closer look, it turns out to be the little deer that Sihyun saved. But it is about to lose the second life that was given to it by Sihyun. Sihyun immediately turns around, chasing after them, urging Jong to calm down and not shoot the deer. However, he soon realizes that the old man can't hear him over the sound of his running, which means that the water deer is in serious danger. To prevent the deer from dying, Sihyun realizes that he has to do something, and he uses his power to activate vines that grab the old man's leg, stopping him at the spot. This shocks the old man, who wonders where the vines suddenly popped out from. Nonetheless, he is still hell-bent on teaching the deer a lesson, but Sihyun grabs him, urging him to calm down. Sihyun thinks of what to say, and just then it dawns on him what he can say. He immediately tells Jong that the deer is his pet, shocking the old man. He asks him if he is toying with him, but Sihyun lets him know that he rescued the deer from a trap some days earlier. He tells the old man to watch what he does, and he kneels, urging the deer to come to him. To Jong's surprise, the deer walks up to Sihyun, and Sihyun uses this opportunity to tell Jong that the deer is a good animal. Jong uses this against him, asking him why his deer tear up his sweet potato field if it is a good animal, as he claimed. Jong urges him to put a collar on the deer because the next time something like this happens, he is going to bill him. Sihyun assures him that he understands, and just as he prepares to leave, Jong lets him know that he has no intention of killing the deer because his gun is filled with blank cartridges. He reveals that there is a designated hunting season for water deer, and hunters usually come around by that time. He then urges Sihyun to do something before the hunting season comes. He also mentions that he summoned him because he wanted to give him the jelly that the village chief had made for him. Sihyun is surprised to hear this, and Jong mentions that it is acorn jelly, which tastes great when paired with lettuce and some spices. Sihyun is blown away when he hears this, and he thanks the old man for the assistance. After this, Jong tells him to head back home to take care of his deer. Sihyun then turns to the deer, telling it that it would be in trouble if it disturbs Jong's farm again. It then dawns on Sihyun that the deer needs a means of identification, and he ties a piece of clothing around its neck to make sure that people know not to hurt it. After he is done with this, he sends the deer back to its mom. At Jong's house, he is still puzzled at the fact that Sihyun chose a deer as his pet when he could have taken a dog or a cat as his pet. After this, Sihyun returns home, and to his surprise, he finds his brother waiting for him. Sihyun is completely blown away, and he asks his brother why he is there when he has a tight schedule. Siwoo reveals that he actually had some free time, which is why he dropped by. Sihyun notices that there is someone with him, and he asks Siwoo who he is. Siwoo introduces the man as his road manager, who also wanted to say hello to him. This is when it dawns on Sihyun that it was the manager who recommended the house, and the manager confirms this, revealing that it belonged to his grandmother. The dude asks him how life has been at the house because no one has lived there in a while, so it must be hard to maintain. Sihyun lets him know that it is actually nice and quiet, and he suggests that they enter so that they can talk over some tea. The moment they step into the house, Siwoo stands there in shock, telling Sihyun that the house looks really abandoned. Sihyun argues that he already scrubbed everywhere, but reveals that he plans to renovate it later, which is why he only cleaned it. Just then, Siwoo spots Sihyun's garden, which he has been seeing in his video. He is overwhelmed seeing it in person, but Sihyun is even more surprised that Siwoo is watching his videos. The manager also takes a look, and he commends Sihyun, telling him that he never expected him to make the garden look that beautiful. Sihyun suddenly notices that the manager is crying, and he confesses that seeing someone living in the house again made him emotional. He reveals that when his grandmother was alive, she loved the garden and always said it was a blessed spot. The dude expresses his relief that he was able to pass the house down to someone as wonderful as Sihyun, and he hopes that he stays healthy and happy while he is there. Sihyun thanks him for the well wishes, assuring him that it means a lot to him. Siwoo then asks Sihyun if he can go check out the greenhouse, to which Sihyun tells him that he is free to. After this, Siwoo made sure to explore every single corner of the house, and he also appeared to be completely excited. At the same time, Sihyun could see that there was a sense of relief in Siwoo. Before they knew it, the sun began to set, and Siwoo prepared to leave. As he sits in the car, Siwoo tells Sihyun that he has his approval. He mentions that he was initially worried about his brother, but after seeing what he has done for himself, he can finally relax. Siwoo commends him, telling him that he had no idea he could adapt well to country life. He then urges him to fix the house up and put in a powerful AC and other house appliances because he will be coming with his group next time, so the house can't look like an abandoned house when they show up. Sihyun acknowledges this, assuring him that he will put everything in place. As he is about to leave, Sihyun thanks his brother for coming, and he urges him to visit again soon. He also urges the manager to come visit whenever his brother is coming, and he assures him that he will. With a smile on his face, Siwoo urges Sihyun to focus on his health while revealing that he will receive a present very soon. Sihyun tries to know what it is, but Siwoo tells him that he will have to wait to know what it is. Sihyun wonders what his brother could send to him, and later that day he decides to name the water deer Bangul. At the RV Entertainment Group in Gangnam, South Korea, Siwoo introduces his band to his brother's channel, which is named Healing in the Countryside. Surprisingly, his sub-vocalist, Kay, also watches his brother's videos, and he talks about how the videos help him to sleep. The rest of the group takes their time to assess the videos, and they admit that Sihyun is quite impressive because the way he makes his dishes and the like are pretty nice. They even talk about how professional it looks with the photo shoot. Because of how good his videos are, they start speculating just how many followers he will hit in the near future. Siwoo then suggests that they all visit his brother sometime, and they agree to his suggestion. Just then, one of them notices that Sihyun has a water deer as a pet, and Siwoo is shocked to see this, since it is the first he has heard of it. Meanwhile, in the countryside, Bangul and Sihyun are getting closer by the day. Apparently, any creature that has tasted a druid's nature force becomes easier to connect with through wild resonance, and giving them a name also helps bind the link, which ultimately creates an invisible bond between them. However, this truth doesn't apply only to creatures that breathe and run. It basically applies to every living thing that is rooted in the earth. Sihyun and Bangul explore the mountain, and after searching for a while, Sihyun finally finds a giant tree, which he wants to make his orin. In ancient times, druids called any plant that they share nature force with an orin. The plant basically becomes the eyes and ears of the forest on behalf of its master, so it was a way of marking territory. Sihyun already bought the entire back mountain along with the house, and he knows that he needs a central hub to properly turn the place into his territory, which is why he chose the largest pine tree to be his orin. Surprisingly, the pine tree gently shook its branches as if responding to his call. With a smile on his face, Sihyun tells the tree that he looks forward to working with it. After his walk with Bangul, Sihyun decides to head to the village chief's house to check on the orchid she talked about some time ago. Suddenly, he notices something strange in the distance, and when he investigates, he realizes that the ground has been dug up. He looks closer and figures out that it wasn't done by a wild animal because it appears that the marks were made by tools. Sihyun figures out that there is something strange because there was a trap that hurt Bangul some time ago, which can only mean that someone is trespassing on his land. He is pissed at the fact that someone is invading his privacy, and even though he doesn't know who the person is, he decides that he is going to teach whoever it is a lesson. Sihyun quickly figures out what he is supposed to do. Basically, in ancient times, the best way to handle something like this was to report to the ruler of the territory, and this is exactly what Sihyun plans to do. He rushes over to the village chief's house. But before he can say anything, he is completely overwhelmed by the luxury that slaps him right on the face. This was his first time there, and he didn't know that the chief had such a luxurious place. In addition to this, the woman has a $5,000 electric bicycle. The chief is surprised to see Sihyun at her place because she was just on her way to his place too. Sihyun asks her why she is coming over, and she reveals that it is because of the dying orchid she mentioned the last time. She already took the orchid with her, and she mentions that she is watering it, but for some reason, it is still wilting. She tells Sihyun that her late husband cherished the orchid so much, which is why it is dear to her heart. Sihyun then takes the orchid, assuring her that he is going to take care of it. Just then, Sihyun tells the woman that he has something to inform her. Without hesitation, Sihyun tells the lady what is going on, and after hearing his complaints, she mentions that the culprit is most likely digging up wild roots or wild ginseng. She mentions that setting traps and digging wild roots is illegal since they have a Wildlife Protection Act. She then assures Sihyun that she is going to notify the patrol unit because what happened is a clear indication that the person trespassed on his land. However, she tells Sihyun that the best thing is to catch the person red-handed. Sihyun asks her why this is important, and she reveals that last spring she caught some guys trying to drive off with stolen wild shoots. However, the police let them go because they claimed that there was no way to prove whose shoots they were since there are no security cameras anywhere. The chief says the thieves are doing this on purpose because they know that they can get away with it. Si-hyun is shocked when he learns about this strange law, and the chief tells him that the best solution this time around is to declare a state of emergency. The chief then brings out a flyer detailing the agenda for the village meeting. She invites him to come to the village hall that evening because they are throwing a welcome party for him. Si-hyun is stunned when he sees this, since it is the last thing he expects. Nonetheless, when that evening came, Si-hyun headed to the hall to attend the meeting and the so-called welcome party that had been organized for him. In fact, the amount of food and temptation present in the hall almost convinces Si-hyun that they are not there for a meeting, but he manages to evade eating the high-calorie dishes presented to him. Soon afterward, the village chief officially begins the town meeting, prompting one of the townsfolk to wonder if something happened in the village. Another man then informs him that the meeting brief stated that a petty thief has recently been lurking in the village. He reveals that another neighbor's sweet potatoes were stolen, and they also dug up some herbs from the hill behind Si-hyun's place. The villagers are not happy to hear this, and it strengthens their resolve to catch the culprit as soon as possible. However, they're worried that the thief is cleverer, and it might not be so easy to catch them. Jong suggests setting up regular patrols around the village to keep an eye out for the thief and also watch out for wildfires. Satisfied with his idea, the village chief asks if anyone has other suggestions or objections to Jong's idea. Everyone agrees with the suggestion, so the village chief happily announces that they'll all work together, taking turns on patrol to catch the thief red-handed. After hashing out the meeting agenda, the villagers immediately pick up from where they left off with the feast. Si-hyun is quite surprised that they finished the so-called town meeting very fast. Just then, a middle-aged dude approaches Si-hyun, asking if he's the young man who moved into the house close to the mountain. Before Si-hyun can speak, the man introduces himself as Lee Dong-bok, the Secretary General of the Sports Council and sponsor of the town meeting. After exchanging greetings, Dong-bok asks if Si-hyun brought the rice cakes served at the meeting. Flustered, Si-hyun shyly replies that he had to bring something since this was his first time meeting everyone. Dong-bok then commends Si-hyun for having such good manners and also compliments the delicious rice cakes. Afterwards, Dong-bok wonders if Si-hyun works out because he's built like a Syrian wrestler. Unable to respond, Si-hyun simply chuckles nervously at the comparison. Luckily, the village chief steps in and tells Dong-bok to go recruit elsewhere because Si-hyun came to the countryside to recover after a major surgery. Dong-bok expresses his disappointment that he can't recruit Si-hyun, who has the perfect physique for Syrian wrestling. The village chief quickly scolds him, telling him to stop meddling and focus on his own wrestlers, whose poor performances have been bringing shame to the town. As the two continue bickering, Si-hyun can only smile awkwardly, caught in the middle of their argument. Just then, a dog suddenly runs up and starts licking Si-hyun's fingers, startling him. As Si-hyun wonders where it came from, Dong-bok cheerfully explains that the dog belongs to him and introduces it as Baduk. Everyone is surprised when the dog curls up on Si-hyun's lap despite being infamous for being a mean dog, even towards its owner. As usual, the village chief takes the opportunity to trip Dong-bok up by remarking that animals always know a good person, a comment which is clearly aimed at calling Dong-bok a bad person. Feeling betrayed, Dong-bok can't believe his own dog, who usually snaps at him, is currently acting cute with Si-hyun. Before he can even say anything, the dog growls at him just because Dong-bok called out to him. Amidst the subtle bickering and warmth from everyone, Si-hyun's first town meeting finally came to an end. A few days later, Si-hyun continues filming his content and explains to his viewers that he has been away because he had to visit the hospital for a checkup. He then happily announces that he has finally been cleared of morbid obesity. Apparently, he lost about 5 kilograms and went from 123 kilograms to 118. Thanks to this, Si-hyun was permitted by his doctor to eat whatever he wanted for one meal once a week. Si-hyun chose today as his cheat day, and he decided to have grilled pork belly as his cheat meal. He then tells the audience that all the vegetables he will be pairing with the dish were freshly picked from his own garden. Today's spread includes garlic, perilla leaves, lettuce, and tomatoes. After positioning the camera, Si-hyun eagerly prepares to dig into the feast while showing his viewers how to make the perfect wrap. He starts by gently shaking the excess water off a lettuce leaf before placing a perilla leaf on top. Next, he carefully adds 2 slices of perfectly cooked pork belly, followed by a bit of garlic and a touch of spice. Satisfied with the combination, he folds the wrap and pops it into his mouth. As soon as he chews into the wrap, a combination of tastes explodes in Si-hyun's mouth, making him feel all warm and fuzzy, nourished by the energy of the earth. Every single one of the ingredients contained in the wrap was as though they had achieved perfect harmony in his mouth. Satisfied with this combo, Si-hyun decides to up the taste by adding the aged kimchi he received from the village chief. Apparently, the elders had given him a lot of side dishes to take home during the town meeting. Sihyun then rolls some pork belly in the aged kimchi, and as soon as he tastes it, the way the sour kimchi harmonizes perfectly with the pork belly sends Sihyun to cloud 9. He then continues with his meal, while recording as if no one else but him and that meal existed at that very moment. After feasting, Sihyun posted the video before relaxing to let everything he ate settle down. He admits that he may have lost control while eating because it has been a while since he last ate this much. Embarrassed for pigging out, Sihyun decides to take his time eating more slowly next time. Suddenly, a shrill ring echoes from his phone, startling the cat beside him. Sihyun quickly checks his phone to see that it was a call from the village chief, making him anxious. However, when he picks it up, the village chief simply explains that she just wants to check on her dying orchid. Sihyun is instantly relieved as he informs her that the orchid has been revived and he was already planning to bring it over tomorrow. The village chief is pleased to hear this, so she decides to give him payment for his services, but Sihyun turns her down, explaining that he didn't do it expecting anything in return. However, the village chief lets him know that it's rude to refuse money offered by an elder. She then tells him to consider it a little pocket money, which she will be sending directly to his account. Sihyun has no choice but to reluctantly agree, after which they bid each other goodbye before ending the call. Although embarrassed by the whole exchange, Sihyun decides to gratefully accept her gift. A few seconds later, he receives the notification for the payment, which instantly leaves him utterly shocked to the point where he loses function of his nerves and mindlessly drops his phone in the process. Unable to comprehend what he had just seen, Sihyun's legs immediately turn to jelly as he plops on the porch stairs, trying to wrap his head around the fact that the village chief sent him 5 million won just for taking care of a single orchid. In his previous life as a druid, Sihyun's master used to tell him that druids must be properly rewarded for their skills, whether they're saving a plant or tackling an enemy. This was the principle Sihyun had lived by because the world basically works on a give-and-take basis. His master also warned him that life would throw more work at him if he received too much. Sihyun finally understood what his master meant as he stared at the crazy amount of money the village chief had sent him for doing such a small thing. The insane amount just made him tremble, and he was confused about what to do with this much money. Unable to keep it for himself, Sihyun tries to return it to her, but when he calls her again, she just scolds him for rejecting her sincerity. Sihyun had to accept the gift, but he decided to give her something else in return. Since it's almost time to harvest the grapes from his garden, he decides to use some of them to brew wine for the village chief. A few moments later, Sihyun turns to his favorite place, the internet, where he orders a 220-liter French oak barrel for his winemaking. Although it cost him almost 1 million won, Sihyun didn't mind because it was worth every penny. Back when he was a druid, he didn't need to purchase barrels since he grew up around a lot of oak trees. Looking back now, Sihyun can't help but miss those days when life was much simpler. Putting that thought aside, Sihyun looks forward to making some wine with the delicious grapes from his garden, which is now overflowing with the power of nature. However, he decides to let the grapes ripen a bit more into their freshest state. Soon afterward, Sihyun receives an unexpected visitor, one he doesn't recall inviting. It was a contractor named Yu Seonju who had been hired by Siwoo to fix Sihyun's dilapidated house. After confirming the man's identity, Sihyun let him tinker around the house for an inspection while he spoke with Siwoo on the phone. Sihyun tells Siwoo that he's nervous about the house inspection, but Siwoo assures him that Seonju is an expert who has done several restoration works on other Hanok residents. Sihyun finally figures out that this was the gift Siwoo talked about the last time he visited with his road manager. He tells Siwoo that he would have managed the house with all the fuss, but Siwoo says it didn't sit right with him to have his big brother living in such a place. He then reassures Sihyun that he will cover the cost of the renovations and tells him not to worry about it. Though flustered, Sihyun accepts the offer, and Siwoo informs him that the contractor is an uncle of one of his band members who is also a fan of Sihyun's channel. Since they have such a connection, Siwoo assures him that the contractor will take care of everything, and Sihyun can just give the band member an autograph later to show his gratitude. Hisu, who's listening to Siwoo's call from a corner, is very excited when he hears this. On the other hand, Sihyun thanks Siwoo for the gift, after which they end the call. At the same time, Seonju completes the inspection, and Sihyun anxiously asks him for the result of his analysis. Seonju then informs Sihyun that the house is a complete mess and the kitchen will certainly collapse in the next typhoon season. He also points out that the ceiling is just a board thrown on top of beams, and the kitchen pillars have almost been completely feasted upon by termites. Sihyun isn't happy to hear that his precious space is a mess because a druid's house is supposed to be a sanctuary, built as one with nature. Since he moved in, he hadn't felt uncomfortable, so he just thought he could bear with the house in this state for a while without worries. As if trying to console him, Seonju informs Sihyun that the roof and tiles on the house are quite strong, and some of the structures are still sturdy. However, he strongly mentions that the major problem is the termites, and they'll have to be dealt with as soon as possible because if left alone, they may make the structure unstable, resulting in the house collapsing. Seonju also tells Sihyun that the termite infestation might cause allergies or even bite him in the long run. Sihyun isn't concerned to hear this because he knows that termites wouldn't dare hurt a druid. However, he admits that there's no reason not to listen to the contractor's advice since Siwoo has already hired and offered to pay for the renovation. He then asks how much the renovations will cost, and Seonju reassures him that it's not as much as he fears. Seonju also informs him that he can apply for a subsidy since the government provides about half the cost for major repairs on a Hanak in this area. Sihyun is over the moon to hear this, so he decides to leave everything to Seonju to handle. Seonju then reassures him that he will pay extra attention to the renovations since Sihyun is Siwoo's brother. After seeing Seonju off, Sihyun can't help but be relieved that the government provides half the cost for the renovations. He was initially feeling guilty, but after learning about the subsidy, it was as if a huge weight had been lifted off his shoulders. As he heads back inside, Sihyun finds himself looking forward to this renovation, and from Seonju's words, he concludes that it will be a large-scale renovation. He then stares at the house for a while, wondering what it would look like when they're finished with the repairs. Lost in these thoughts, Sihyun stood there for a while until the sun set. A few days later, he heads to the market where he runs into Jung, whose voice suddenly startles him. Jung wonders why Sihyun is jumpy and asks if he's out to do some shopping. Sihyun tells him that he came out to buy a few things and run some errands. Looking at the shopping bag in his hand, Jung can only find some tofu, soy milk, and vegetables, which makes him wonder if Sihyun is training to join the monastery. Sihyun explains that he orders most of his groceries online since they're cheaper. Even though it looks like Sihyun is on a strict diet, Jeong tells him that he actually looks better and his neck is more visible than when he first arrived. Pleased with the compliment, Sihyun thanks Jung, who then asks why he's hanging around outside this particular store. Sihyun explains that he dug up some herbs from the back mountain and wanted to ask about selling them. He then goes on to narrate that a few days ago, he was chasing after his pet water deer when it suddenly pulled out a ginseng root. Jung finds this story absurd as he wonders when a deer became so domesticated that they can help someone dig up herbs. Sihyun insists that he's telling the truth, but Jung doesn't buy the silly story and simply offers to take Sihyun to a better place to exchange the herb for money. As Jung leads the way, he informs Sihyun that they need an expert to appraise the herb before sale. Sihyun is taken aback to hear this, but the appraiser turns out to be none other than the village chief. Sihyun is surprised that the village chief is an appraiser, while Jung reveals that he knows this because he's actually a collector who gathers a bit of everything, and the village chief helps him sell them. Afterwards, Jung informs the village chief that Sihyun has herbs to sell. Sihyun then hands her a bag containing the herbs, but as she opens it, the village chief has already dismissed whatever is inside as unimportant. But the next moment, she swallows her words in shock as she counts the leaves on the ginseng. Just as Jung is about to ask if the herb is ginseng, the village chief pulls it out as she excitedly announces that it's actually wild ginseng. Both Sihyun and Jung are utterly shocked by this revelation because wild ginseng is supposed to be the cream of the crop. The village chief's voice echoed through the small town as she scolds Sihyun for carrying the precious wild ginseng inside a damned plastic bag as opposed to a gold platter. Her reaction was because wild ginsengs are roots that grow for decades, absorbing the energy of the forest and untouched by human hands. Apart from that, the one brought by Sihyun is over 50 years old, which makes it incredibly rare and extremely valuable. The village chief then asks Sihyun where he got it from, and Sihyun explains that his pet deer dug it near the top of the mountain. As usual, the village chief finds this story absurd, making her wonder if Sihyun is domestically raising a water deer. Jeong tells the chief that the latter part is true, and Sihyun even puts a pretty collar on the deer. The chief is surprised to hear this as she admits that she's lived way too long. Jeong then asks her about selling the ginseng, and the chief reassures him that selling the herb is very easy. She informs them that she'll send a photo of the herb to the Ginseng Diggers Association to find a buyer. The village chief adds that this particular wild ginseng could be worth more than 30 million won. According to her, its value can even triple if it comes with a ridiculous story. As an example, she describes a ginseng digger who searched the mountains for over 6 months without finding a single root, until the digger dreamed of a mountain spirit who pointed him toward a specific location. The next day, he went there and discovered an entire patch of wild ginseng exactly where the spirit had indicated. Since Sihyun already has one of those stories, they can just tweak it a bit to say he stumbled on a blessed omen and followed a lucky deer only to end up finding the wild ginseng. However, Jung doesn't care for such ridiculous nonsense, but the chief tells them to leave it to her. She reassures Sihyun that she'll handle everything without even collecting a single commission from him. Sihyun gladly thanks the chief and decides to trust her with the wild ginseng root. After the meeting, Sihyun and Jung headed back home. On the way, Jung asks Sihyun about his opinion regarding the village chief's house, which happens to be the most beautiful house in the village. Si-hyun admits that the house is indeed beautiful, and her greenhouse is quite huge. Jong then reveals that the village chief's husband used to be the boss of a big company that made a fortune building cars and ships. However, he suddenly fell ill after he retired to the countryside with his wife. It wasn't even up to 3 years before he passed away from his illness, and his wife, who had just decided to take a break after raising her children, had to spend all her time taking care of him before his death. According to Jong, she started gathering herbs to keep him alive, which is how she became an expert in the field, and now she serves as a broker just for fun. Jong also points out that the village chief seems to have a lot of luck when it comes to making money. He then tells Si-hyun not to worry about finding a buyer for his wild ginseng because the village chief has enough connections to find a buyer. As soon as the words leave his mouth, he receives a text from her saying she has already found a buyer. According to the message, the wild ginseng was appraised to be at least 80 years old and sold for 100 million won. Si-hyun is stunned to hear this and even more shocked when Jong reveals that the village chief said she sold it to the president of a famous company. He then warns Si-hyun to keep the ginseng story to himself and not to brag about the money to outsiders, as that might bring unwanted trouble to his doorstep. Si-hyun is moved by his concern, and it immediately reminds him of a memory he had long forgotten. It was the memory of his druid master who had always stood by him, and now Jong was doing the same. Remembering that it has been a while since anyone worried about him like this, a gentle smile spreads across Si-hyun's face. He then happily announces that he would treat Jong to a lot of pork meat once the money comes in, but Jong teases him about fixing the potato field his pet deer had trashed the last time. Without even realizing it, Si-hyun was gradually becoming a part of this small village. A few days later, the renovations on Si-hyun's house began in earnest as several workers worked tirelessly to fix up the place. Seonju, on the other hand, shows Si-hyun the remodeling plan, just in case he needed to add or change anything. From the plan, Seonju explains how they plan to fix the ceiling and restore it to its original state. He also adds that they will be extending the house to connect it to the outdoor bathroom. Jong tells Si-hyun that they're planning to upgrade the entire structure to a modern layout. Si-hyun is very pleased with all the plans and can't believe that the house is bigger than he expected. From the plan, it was going to have 3 bedrooms and a full kitchen. After going through all the details, Si-hyun permits Seonju to go ahead with the plan. Seonju then asks Si-hyun what he plans to do with the front gate and wall next to it. Si-hyun cheerfully shows off the design he had in mind, which just looks like a kindergarten doodle. In one breath, he explains his vision and how he plans to plant large apples or persimmon trees along the outside walls. Si-hyun also wants to put up an arched gateway covered in roses. Seonju commends his plan since a lot of people do this so that the thorns on the roses serve as a natural fence. Seonju, however, advises him to opt for a motorized gate system, which is better for security. Si-hyun tells him that he didn't want roses because of security reasons, but because they're useful for making tea. And aside from being very beautiful, they have antibacterial properties. Though stunned by Si-hyun's reasoning, Seonju decides to respect his wishes and focus on adding security to the back of the house. And just like that, Si-hyun's dilapidated house gradually began to come to life, like winter giving way to spring. Just like where he lived in his previous life, this house was set to become a home where the forces of nature blended into the air. Later that night, as Si-hyun prepares to retire for the night, he calls to give Siwoo updates on the renovations, which could take up to 2 weeks according to the contractor. Siwoo worries that Si-hyun has to sleep in the greenhouse until the renovations are done. However, Si-hyun doesn't mind as he feels staying there will give him more content for his vlog. Siwoo comments that Si-hyun is beginning to sound like a full-fledged YouTuber. Si-hyun then asks him about his schedule, and Siwoo tells him that it's the usual non-stop hustle. He also reveals that his band will be heading out on tour soon. Si-hyun worries about his brother's health and tells him not to overexert himself too much. However, Siwoo believes that being busy is a good thing, and he advises Si-hyun to worry about his own health instead. Before hanging up, he promises to make time to swing by the house before leaving for their European tour. After the call, Si-hyun finds himself worrying for Siwoo, who is constantly working while worrying about him. He felt a bit guilty for not being able to do anything for Siwoo except to cheer for him from afar. Afterwards, Si-hyun stares at the night sky, which seemed clearer from the greenhouse as he continued to think about Siwoo. He hopes the renovation can be completed before Siwoo drops by next time, so that he can relax here without worrying about his busy idol schedule. While thinking about this, Si-hyun slowly drifted to sleep, staring at the clear stars from the greenhouse. The following morning, on the mountain behind his house, Si-hyun chases after his pet deer, scolding her for destroying some sprouts and eating all the lettuce in his garden. Every morning, Si-hyun spent 1 hour tending to the forest by checking on new sprouts and listening to the complaints of the little lives in the mountain. He also soothes the scattered natural energy left in the forest from the previous night. Life was good for Si-hyun, and it would be easier if he didn't have to deal with the naughty little deer every morning. However, Sihyeon feels a little guilty scolding her since he made a whopping 100 million won thanks to her finding the wild ginseng. Ever since the deer started following him, it had absorbed a lot of energy by his side, which completely healed her injured leg. Now that she's healthier, the deer has become livelier and her coat radiant. In fact, the deer has become the main attraction on Sihyeon's channel, and every time she appears, his views skyrocket more than in his solo videos. Suddenly, the deer is spooked, and Sihyeon senses Oren's aura, making him wonder if the tree detected an anomaly. Sihyeon quickly channels his connection to Oren, which allows him to see and feel everything the tree senses. From the connection, he finally sees the culprit who has been pillaging everything on the mountain. Meanwhile, the thieves are having a great time stealing mushrooms from the back mountain. One of them even scolds his subordinate for yanking out the mushrooms, which could damage them and cause their value to drop. After the subordinate apologizes, the man shows him how to gently harvest them, preserving their value. As they continue searching for things to steal, the subordinate worries that the mountain has a new owner, so they need to be careful. However, the other dude dismisses his concern, citing that they've been pillaging this mountain for years without encountering any problems. He then urges his partner to keep moving as they need to clear out the whole mountain before sunset. A few minutes later, they stumble upon a rich patch of matsutake mushrooms, which shouldn't be growing until autumn. However, the thieves have no time to consider this as they celebrate hitting the jackpot. The mushrooms were very healthy and plump, and the main thief figures there must be at least hundreds of them in this patch. He quickly urges the other dude to join him, but he gets no answer because his partner is frozen on the spot with fear as he is witnessing a strange occurrence. A few wild animals from the forest had surrounded them and were staring at them weirdly. Despite being terrified, the thieves decide to get back to work instead of running like any sane human would have done. But before they can continue, a sudden fog spreads throughout the forest, spooking them. Still, the thieves refuse to budge, and what they didn't know was that Sihyeon was the one controlling the whole thing from behind the scenes. Sihyeon is surprised that the thieves ignored his warnings even though they're supposed to be afraid of the stunt he just pulled. However, it seems like their greed is stronger than their fear of what they can't understand. Since they refuse to see reason, Sihyeon decides to teach them a proper lesson by scaring them to the point where they never return to this mountain again. He then controls the animals to charge towards the thieves, who, by now, decide to abandon everything and run for their lives. As they continue to flee, one of the thieves can't help but wonder why the animals are acting strange, but the other dude urges him to keep running instead of trying to analyze the situation. At this point, the thieves are already so terrified that they begin to beg the raging animals to spare them, but Sihyeon isn't done with his lesson. Basically, he's able to do all this by using Oren as a conduit to bind all living things in the forest into one. Any living thing connected by this power becomes the forest itself and drives out intruders, which is why druids are feared in their lands. Sihyeon is even more pissed that the thieves touched his matsutake mushrooms, which he was growing to entertain the villagers during their next gathering. To end the chase, Sihyeon summons a vine to trap the men, leaving them completely terrified. They couldn't wrap their heads around the strange events, and now a tree was attacking them. After trapping the thieves, Sihyeon calls the village chief to inform her of the incident. A little while later, the village chief arrives with the police, and she angrily scolds them as soon as she steps out of the police vehicle. Afterwards, she checks on Sihyeon to make sure he didn't harm himself chasing the thieves. She then notices that the thieves look completely battered, making her wonder what happened to them. Sihyeon simply tells her that they rolled down the mountain while trying to escape. Looking closely at them, the village chief realizes that they're the same dudes who stole her herbs and then played dumb when she caught them. Now she's thrilled that they messed with the wrong person, so there's definitely no way they're getting out of this one like last time. The police officer also informs the thieves that they can't deny the crime this time because the evidence against them is sufficient, and it's clear they stole with the intention to sell. The main thief grits his teeth in anger when he hears this and insists that a demon took over the tree to attack them. He also mentions that all the animals in the forest were acting as if they were possessed. He then turns to Sihyeon, but what breaks Sihyeon's heart is when the thief refers to him as chubby. The thief then urges the police officer to arrest Sihyeon since he's the owner of the mountain, and he must be practicing some kind of witchcraft that controls ghosts. The village chief is livid when she hears this and immediately pounces on them to teach them a lesson for spewing nonsense. The officer tries to hold her back as she curses them, describing how to tear them apart, exactly how a serial killer would do. Sihyeon is utterly shocked by the words coming out of her mouth, as he never expected the gentle village chief to be this hardcore. The officer decides to take the culprits to the station while the thief continues trying to convince them that a tree attacked him. He swears that the mountain is haunted, and just then, a priest who has just arrived at the scene overhears this. He angrily scolds the man for spewing lies and insists that the mountain belongs to the Lord. Sihyun is surprised to see a priest here while the priest stares at him, wondering who he is. In Sihyun's past life as a druid, the clergy was always divided into two groups. Some were greedy like goblins and coveted what wasn't theirs, while others dedicated themselves to their faith. Although druids aren't considered clergy, their way of living was very similar to that of the clergy who served the divine. Druids dedicated their lives to nature and proved themselves through the hardships they endured. Back then, such people were known as seekers or ascetics. Sihyun wonders what type of priest this one in front of him will be. After learning about what the thieves did, the priest admonishes them for stealing and lying that the forest attacked them just to get out of facing the law. He goes on to quote the scriptures and preach to the thieves, after which he scolds them a little more for saying the mountain is haunted. To calm him down, the officer assures the priest that the thieves are just spewing nonsense to get themselves off the hook. He adds that Sihyun is the owner of the mountain, and he already recorded everything when he saw the thieves picking up mushrooms. After Sihyun properly greets him, the priest introduces himself as Father Mateo of Dongwon Parish. He also mentions that the monastery on the other side of the mountain is under his care. Mateo then apologizes for not managing his part of the mountain properly and allowing the thieves to have access to Sihyun's side. Sihyun quickly tells him that it's not his fault and also apologizes for the whole commotion. Apparently, Mateo's monastery shares the same hill as Sihyun's house and they're only separated by one slope. Since this is the case, Sihyun believes that the responsibility for managing access to the mountain falls on both their shoulders. Sihyun is quite surprised that Mateo took the blame without demanding an apology from him since they're both responsible. This alone convinces him that Mateo is one of the good priests. The village chief, Stella, then checks the loot stolen by the thieves and is stunned to see that they have almost cleared out the entire mountain. She suggests that Sihyun and Mateo share the loot equally since the thieves must have stopped by the monastery's side before looting from Sihyun's side of the mountain. However, Sihyun turns her down, explaining that he was planning to share them during the next village meeting. Mateo also refuses to accept his share and tells Stella to keep it for the elders to feast on. Stella remarks that she's already expecting Mateo to mention the elders. Afterwards, the officer prepares to leave with the culprits and reassures Stella that they'll investigate properly since the thieves are repeat offenders. Stella firmly tells him to make sure they're punished without mercy. The officer acknowledges this and promises to contact her later with the details. As the police car drives off, Stella continues to angrily curse the thieves, making Sihyun and the priest amused. And just like that, the drama with the thieves faded away like the morning breeze on the mountain. A few days later, Sihyun's house renovations were completed and Stella came to check it out. She points out that the house looks almost unrecognizable from the dump it was before and mentions that she thought it would take at least a month to complete the renovations. Sihyun informs Stella that they still have a few things to fix around the house, but it should be finished soon. Stella is just glad that Sihyun finally has a house that doesn't look like a haunted ghost place. Sihyun then tells her to stay over for a meal which he made using the tomatoes from his garden. Stella accepts the offer without hesitation because who can say no to fresh, homegrown tomatoes? However, before they can proceed, Jong drops by to ask for some lettuce from Sihyun's garden. He explains that he bought the exact same lettuce seeds Sihyun got the last time, but for some reason, his own lettuce doesn't taste as good as Sihyun's. According to Jong, Sihyun's lettuce has a crunchy richness that others lack. Without hesitation, Sihyun happily offers to harvest some for him and even plans to throw in some cabbage. What Jong doesn't know is that Sihyun's plants are different because anything touched by a druid turns out exceptional in both flavor and nutrients. After all, the plants were thriving because Sihyun gave them exactly what they needed. Meanwhile, Stella scolds Jong for trying to get Sihyun's produce for free. Curious about why he's making such a fuss over the lettuce, she decides to taste it herself. The moment she takes a bite, she instantly understands his obsession, and to Jong's surprise, Stella immediately asks Sihyun if she can have some as well. After filling her basket, Jong and Stella join Sihyun to prepare the meal. While harvesting some tomatoes, Sihyun learns that Mateo sells soap made at the monastery. She mentions that he usually brings some to the senior center, and she has tried it before. Sihyun is surprised to hear this, as he thought the monastery lived off donations. However, Jong explains that the monks there handle their needs because there's no real reason for believers to visit the monastery, so no one makes any donations. He also mentions that they might quit making soap due to the scarce supply of bamboo, and Mateo has been worrying about this since it's their source of income. This worries Sihyun because Mateo seems like a good guy, so he makes up his mind to find a way to help the monastery soon. Sometime later, Sihyun serves the elders with the tomato salad he prepared, and Stella notes that he added some slices of cheese. Sihyun then explains that he layered it with tomatoes and drizzled some olive oil and lemon juice over it. Since they mostly use perilla leaves every day, he decided to give them something different to try. Jong and Stella are quite pleased with the result when they try the salad. Jong, especially, who doesn't really care for Western food, admits that the salad is so refreshing. He wonders why Sihyun's tomatoes are sweeter than the normal ones he has tried. On the other hand, Stella also loves the dish and mentions that she feels better after eating it. Apparently, she has a weak stomach and has struggled with chronic gastritis for years, leaving her with heartburn every time she eats. However, Sihyun's dish left a soothing feeling in her stomach. Jung then asks Sihyun to add some of the tomatoes to his basket, but Stella scolds him for being too greedy. Jung reminds her that she also asked for lettuce, so she has no right to pick on him. Stella complains that Sihyun might run out of food if they keep taking his produce, but Jung lets her know that Sihyun isn't some wild man living strictly off the land. As the duo continues to bicker, a satisfied smile spreads across Sihyun's face. As a druid, their reaction was the highest form of praise for him, and he didn't mind giving them everything from his small farm, so he excuses himself to harvest some tomatoes for them. Being at the center of the cycle of nature, which brings joy to people, Sihyun finally feels the happiness he experienced from his past life living as a true druid. Meanwhile, at a beauty salon in the city, Hesu is seen scrolling through the comment section on Sihyun's channel while getting a haircut with Siwoo. Hesu excitedly urges the hairdresser to subscribe to the channel and leave a nice comment. The woman agrees without hesitation, while Siwoo, wondering why Hesu was promoting the channel, reminds him that Sihyun is his brother. Hesu explains that he's not promoting the channel, but being a passionate fan. He adds that they need to help Sihyun boost his follower count because posting aimlessly won't do it. Referring to Sihyun by the nickname he created, Hesu reveals that he would probably starve without these regular vlogs to watch during mealtimes. Confused by the odd name, Siwoo asks what it means. Hesu explains that he came up with the nickname because of the gentle way Sihyun calls the deer, Bangul. He also insists that it perfectly suits both Sihyun and his channel, though Siwoo isn't convinced. When the hairdresser realizes the channel belongs to Siwoo's older brother, she remarks that Sihyun must be just as handsome as he is. However, Siwoo explains that Sihyun gained weight because of his illness, but when they were younger, everyone used to say Sihyun was the more handsome of the two. This only makes Hesu even more eager to see what his idol looks like in person. Determined to make it happen, he quickly comes up with an idea. Since they were already planning to film some exclusive team content, Hesu suggests shooting it at Sihyun's house instead. Meanwhile, back in the countryside, it has begun to rain heavily, and it's announced that the monsoon season is expected to begin nationwide starting this week. Heavy rainstorms were expected in certain regions, and Sihyun's area was among them. While watching the news report, Sihyun is just glad that the house renovation finished early or the rainstorms would have caused more problems for him. Now that he had a roof over his head, Sihyun didn't have to worry about the heavy downpour, and seeing how it didn't affect the new house, Sihyun admits that Seonju's remodeling work was exceptional. Just lying around the outdoor wooden floors, Sihyun had completely forgotten that he initially had no intention of renovating the house. Instead of lazing around, he decides to harvest some lettuce from the garden to take to the village meeting, where they were planning to eat the loot almost stolen by the thieves. Sihyun looks forward to the gathering because it's his first time trying pine mushrooms. As he harvests the lettuce, Sihyun finds himself thinking about his subscriber count, which has suddenly skyrocketed out of nowhere. He was happy with the results, but it also brought some bad eggs dropping mean comments on his videos. However, every time a malicious comment appears, it is immediately drowned out by supportive comments. Thanks to this, Sihyun's comment section has stayed relatively clean. However, he couldn't understand why people would leave such malicious hate for a stranger online. At the same time, he also didn't understand the mindset of those who supported him wholeheartedly. Some anti-fans of Siwoo's band even attacked him for always humming tracker songs in his videos, which they consider marketing. Despite the hate, Sihyun is very grateful to those who have been supporting him and drowning out the hate comments. From his supporters, there was one person whom Sihyun is curious about, and it's the fan who constantly pushes the druid narrative. After gathering the lettuce, Sihyun decides to head to the village hall, but immediately realizes he can't get to the hall by walking through the heavy downpour. Just as he's at his wit's end, Jong arrives in his truck to pick Sihyun up since he's also heading that way. Meanwhile, at the town hall, the villagers are busy grilling their meat and mushrooms despite the heavy downpour. A few moments later, Stella addresses everyone, informing them that the thieves pillaging their village were caught on the mountain behind Sihyun's house. She also tells them that after the investigation, they were found to have committed a long list of crimes and have been officially placed under arrest. According to Stella, the thieves parked their vehicles nearby at the entrance of the town and used the mountain path behind the monastery to sneak into the village every single time in the last few years. She then advises everyone to be on the lookout so things like this never happen in their village again. Afterwards, Stella tells everyone to applaud Sihyun for capturing the thieves, after which she announces that it's time to feast while wishing the thieves a long prison sentence. After her address, the townsfolk immediately start enjoying the mushroom and meat feast. After tasting the pine mushrooms, they remark that it's the best one they've ever had. Sihyun then checks on the guests to make sure they're enjoying themselves and even presents his own combo for them to try. He noticed that everyone was eating the pine mushroom and meat separately, so he suggested trying it sandwiched with some kimchi. Sihyun tells them that he saw the combo on YouTube and it seemed delicious, so he decided to try it out. However, Stella isn't convinced and wonders why anyone would eat them like that. She tells Sihyun that king oyster mushrooms go better when eaten that way with beef, and those types of mushrooms aren't exactly costly. To show him what she means, Stella shoves the combo into Sihyun's mouth, and after trying it, he finally admits that pine mushrooms are best eaten separately. Stella then explains that it's because the pine mushrooms from their mountain have a strong scent, so they don't pair well with just anything. One of the guests also advises Sihyun to listen to the village chief since she has eaten a lot of quality food during her lifetime. Sihyun happily acknowledges their advice and decides to eat the dish separately. Just then, the Youth Association president steps in to thank Sihyun for giving them such an expensive feast. Apparently, he has never tasted the mushrooms and only sold them because they cost quite a penny. Sihyun offers to help him grill some more meat, but the guy turns him down. He explains that it's because grilling meat has always been his job as the Youth Association president. The dude jokingly tells Sihyun to take over as the president if he truly wants to grill meat. Afterwards, he thanks Sihyun again for the feast and asks him to come to him if he ever needs any help. Sihyun could smell the scent of dried grain feed from the youth president, who was in his late 40s and ran a chicken farm nearby. Right then, Sihyun suddenly recalls a dream he had been harboring all this time, which was to raise chickens. He then asks the youth president for his opinion, but Stella overhears him, making her wonder why he suddenly wants to raise chickens. Sihyun explains that it would help him get fresh eggs, and besides, young chicks are so cute to look at. However, the youth president tells him that they're only cute when they're young, but once they grow up, the constant crowing early in the morning becomes unbearable. Apart from that, they mess up the place, pooping uncontrollably everywhere. He also points out that the poop might smell up Sihyun's newly remodeled house. With all these reasons, Sihyun decides to reconsider his decision. Though used to nature itself, Sihyun admits that there's still a lot he doesn't know when it comes to country life. Thankfully, his biggest trait as a druid is the fact that he asks questions when he doesn't know something. Just like pine mushrooms and raising chickens, Sihyun agrees that some things are best left alone and untouched. As Sihyun watches the villagers enjoy themselves, he can feel himself gradually growing within the village. The following day, Sihyun receives an emergency alert about the heavy downpour, advising everyone to stay indoors, and so far, he has already received 4 alerts. Sihyun isn't worried because he already secured the greenhouse and other things. However, he was still worried about the grapes falling off due to the heavy downpour. Sihyun considers using a spell to hasten their growth, but he suddenly decides not to since getting through something like this is the purpose of being a druid. Looking towards his precious grape, Sihyun hopes they hang in there until harvest time. He soon receives a call from Jong, who frantically begs him to come over to his farm for an emergency. Sihyun wonders if he's sick, but Jong tells him that he's not, and besides, he could have called emergency services instead of a farm boy if he were sick. He then reveals that one of his cows is sick and the vet is checking it out, but can't handle the large animal alone, so they need an extra strong hand to help move the sick cow. Soon afterward, Sihyun arrives at Jong's cattle shed, where he meets the veterinarian. When he asks what happened, Jong explains that the sick cow suddenly collapsed, and the cow next to it refuses to leave her side. With all the commotion, the other cows in the shed were getting worked up too. Apparently, Jong called his cows by numbers instead of names because he didn't want to get attached to them since they would eventually be sold. However, from the worry clearly written all over his face, Sihyun can tell that he still cares about them. Sihyun then asks if he should move the worried cow to another pen, but Jong decides to do it by himself. The vet then tells them that their priority should be getting the collapsed cow on her feet, as gas might build up in her stomach, making it hard for her to breathe. He then asks Sihyun to help him, and the duo carefully manages to push the collapsed cow to her feet. As the cow cries in pain, Sihyun informs the vet that she's already struggling to breathe. He suggests calming her down first, but the vet points out that they can't use sedatives because she's pregnant. However, Sihyun lets the vet know that he didn't mean they should use medication, but naturally. He adds that he has a natural way of doing it, which works perfectly well on his pet water deer. The vet doesn't believe him, but before he can complain, Sihyun suddenly starts singing, which causes nature's energy to calm the agitated cow. The vet is stunned as he watches the cows in the shed immediately calm down under the influence of Sihyun's song. Afterwards, Sihyun cheerfully asks the vet if he can now treat the cow since she has calmed down a bit. Sometime later, the trio heads inside Jong's house after taking care of the sick cow. Jong offers them a cup of coffee, but Sihyun turns it down because of his diet. The vet then reports his analysis on the cow to Jong, explaining that the sick cow only has a simple fever, but the agitation made her symptoms seem much worse. He then reassures him that the calf inside her is perfectly healthy. The vet also adds that he gave the cow some medications, and she should be fine after proper rest. Jung finally breathes a sigh of relief as he thanks the vet, who immediately turns to ask how Sihyun calmed the cows with a simple song. He's also confused about whether what he heard earlier was even a song and how it instantly calmed the agitated cows. Without waiting for an answer, the vet fires a barrage of questions at Sihyun, wondering if he's some kind of witch doctor. Sihyun is confused about where to start from, and just as he's about to explain himself, Jung chimes in, asking why the vet is making a fuss. The vet completely ignores Jung, as he practically begs Sihyun to teach him how to use the song. Sihyun wasn't expecting that, as the vet told him that the skill is very necessary for him as a vet. Since they can't sedate every agitated animal, having a natural way to calm them down would be a huge help. To his disappointment, Sihyun explains that the song is just a simple Western folk song he learned from YouTube. What the vet doesn't know is that it's actually a humming technique used by druids. It might look like singing, but it is actually a method of breathing in harmony with nature, so it isn't something one can learn just by being taught. Thankfully, Jeong breaks the awkwardness by telling the vet that animals just flock around Sihyun because they adore him, so it has nothing to do with the technique. He also mentions that the village's most infamous mean dog was also fawning over Sihyun a few days ago. The vet who knows about the dog is shocked to hear this, and Jeong adds that animals usually behave so well in front of Sihyun. However, the vet isn't surprised and mentions that he has met someone like that, who animals follow around for no reason. It was one of his professors in college, who was a very skilled veterinarian. The vet then admits that it's an innate skill, so no amount of teaching can help him mimic it, no matter what he does. For the very first time in his life, the vet admits that he's actually envious of Sihyun. To console him, Jong tells him to go to Sihyun whenever he needs help since they're around the same age. The vet is pleased to hear this, as he tells Sihyun that he's 29 years old and wonders how old Sihyun is. Sihyun then reveals that he's only a year younger than the vet. Afterwards, the vet hopes Sihyun can help him out if something like this happens again. He explains that smaller animals are manageable on his own, but bigger ones like cows and horses are tougher to handle without a sedative. Sihyun agrees to help without hesitation, but says he can't do it for free. The vet offers to pay for his services, but Sihyun lets him know that paying with small things like a bag of sweet potatoes should suffice. This leads the vet to conclude that Sihyun is a very peculiar individual. Nevertheless, he agrees to the mode of payment as they both shake on it to seal their deal. Afterwards, Sihyun tells the vet to drop the honorifics and just be comfortable with each other since they're neighbors. Sihyun had finally made a new connection in this world while trying to carry on as a druid in a world without magic. A few days later, it continued to rain non-stop, so Sihyun decided to record some ASMR content. Since the monsoon season is dragging on longer than expected, it has been hard for him to tend to the garden, so he had no content to post. Because of this, Sihyun took a break from his vlog. But since the rain looked beautiful today, he decided to film some ASMR content of the rain. Truthfully, he's only doing this because Siwoo scolded him for not posting frequently and nagged him to be more consistent. Siwoo also informed Sihyun that the members of his band wanted to tag along to visit him in the countryside. Sihyun doesn't know when they intend to visit, but he could tell that his peaceful little space would soon get lively. As Sihyun continues his ASMR content, he decides to show the audience how the rain sounds in different locations. He then heads inside the greenhouse to show them how soothing it sounds when the rain hits the plastic cover on the greenhouse. He's suddenly interrupted by strange noises coming from behind a pile of boxes, making him curious. Before Sihyun can check it out, his cat jumps out from the corner as if to stop him from seeing whatever is behind the boxes. However, one of the boxes toppled over, revealing a wounded cat and her terrified 3 little kittens. Shortly afterwards, Sihyun rushes them to a veterinary clinic where he waits patiently for his turn to see the doctor while comforting the cats. While waiting, he uses wild resonance to investigate what happened to the cat and her kittens, just like he did with the deer. From the cat's memories, Sihyun discovered that the mother cat carried her weak kittens as they made their way down the mountain despite the heavy downpour. It turns out their shelter collapsed due to the constant rain, so the cat was drawn into Sihyun's greenhouse because of its rich nature force. After scanning through the cat's memories, Sihyun commends her for protecting her kittens so well. Just then, Sumin, the vet from Jong's cowshed, steps out holding a dog and is surprised to see Sihyun there. Shortly after, Sihyun takes the cats to see Sumin, who expresses his surprise at running into Sihyun here. Sihyun remarks that he didn't know Sumin owned this clinic, while Sumin points out that his clinic is too small to be called an actual clinic. He then asks about the cats, and Sihyun explains that he found them shivering inside his greenhouse, so he brought them to receive treatment in case they caught a cold. Sumin then checks the cats and only discovers that they have a runny nose and some eye discharge, but nothing too severe. He also mentions that their fevers are down, so they should be fine even without any medication. Sihyun is relieved to hear this, but Sumin advises him not to release the cats back outside. He also suggests keeping them here to get vaccinated and neutered later on. Relieved to hear this, Sihyun thanks Sumin, who claims he was just doing his job, after which he asks Sihyun to help him out with a favor. A few moments later, Sumin leads him to a place where animals needing intensive care are kept. There, Sumin introduces Sihyun to a mean sick cat stuck with a feeding tube. Sumin then explains that the cat refuses to eat normally, so they have no choice but to force feed her glucose and a liquid diet. Sumin's expression suddenly drops when Sihyun asks him what happened to the cat. According to Sumin, the cat was brought in with severe signs of jaundice, and her eyes and gums had turned completely yellow. After running several tests plus the initial treatment, the medical fees for the first day alone came to a whopping 600,000 won. The cat was already in a critical condition, so they had to hospitalize her, but after a few days, the medical bills skyrocketed to several million won. At that point, the owner started ghosting the clinic and never came back again. Sumin was even willing to help the owner work out a payment plan if only she told him that money would be an issue. After the owner disappeared, the cat completely stopped eating, no matter what delicious treat Sumin offered her. Sumin figures that the cat must have known that it had been abandoned, even though it can't speak. Sihyun is actually surprised that Sumin has been taking care of the cat all this time despite the exorbitant cost and zero insurance for pets. Sumin reveals that he asked Sihyun for help because the cost of caring for the cat is becoming overwhelming. Even so, he has no regrets about taking her in, knowing he could save her instead of turning his back on her. Sumin then tells Sihyun to do his calming magic so that he can change the cat's feeding tube. Sihyun decides to check her out before calming her down, but Sumin warns him to be careful as the cat might bite or scratch. As Sihyun gradually approaches her, the cat begins to growl at him, but the next moment it turns docile, allowing him to pet her. Sumin is absolutely bewildered and can't believe the same cat that usually bites and scratches him is suddenly acting cute with Sihyun. Sihyun gently explains that it's simply because cats are naturally wary of strangers, but what he doesn't say is that no animal in the world can resist a druid's touch. Since the cat is calm, Sumin decides to change her feeding tube, but Sihyun tells him to give her a treat instead. Though taken aback by the request, Sumin goes ahead to pull out a treat even though he doubts the cat will eat it. Besides, he's still afraid that she would scratch and bite him as usual, but Sihyun urges him to go ahead. As Sumin gets closer to the treat, the cat looks at Sihyun as if asking for permission, and Sihyun nods to tell her that it's okay to accept the treat because Sumin is a good person who cares for her. After receiving Sihyun's confirmation, the cat happily nibbles on the treat without scratching Sumin as usual. Meanwhile, Sumin is completely stunned as he wonders why she suddenly changed her mind. Sihyun mentions that it must be because the cat finally recognizes him as a good person. Overwhelmed with relief that the cat is finally able to eat, Sumin gently comforts her, telling her to get well soon so they can leave the stuffy hospital behind. Watching them interact, Sihyun could see the scars on Sumin's hand, which he got from desperately trying to keep the cat alive. The scars seemed like engraved medals of honor, and Sihyun could feel the gentle energy flowing between the cat and Sumin, caused by a warm, caring heart. The cat had already finished the treat and even mistaken Sumin's hand for food, finally registering him as a guardian. The following day in the tracker waiting room, Haesu happily enjoys Sihyun's ASMR rain sounds. Leo points out that Haesu might be the only one who listens to rain sound ASMR during the monsoon season. However, Haesu lets them know that they simply can't understand the vibe. Siwoo, who is also scanning through his brother's channel, reasons that Sihyun must have run out of content to film, seeing that he resorted to filming the rain. Even so, Haesu reveals that a lot of people are still commenting favorably about the post. Siwoo points out that Sihyun's content is all over the place as the channel started as a plant parent channel, but now there are dieting tips, animals, and even ASMR. However, Haesu insists it's still on point since the channel description is about healing in the countryside. Just then, their manager barges in to inform them to start packing for their next schedule. As everyone heads out to prepare, Siwoo notices Jerome sleeping in the corner, so he tries to wake him, but Jerome doesn't respond. Worried about him, Siwoo walks up to him only to realize that he looks a bit sick. Shortly afterwards, the team rallies around Jerome, and after checking his temperature, Siwoo discovers that he's burning up. Worried that the situation might turn for the worse, Haesu suggests taking him to the hospital, but Jerome weakly assures them that he's fine. He believes it's just a simple cold that will get better once he takes some medicine. However, Siwoo tells him to check into a hospital if the fever doesn't break soon. Haesu also supports Siwoo and tells Jerome not to push himself too hard, which might make the sickness worse than it already is. He then offers Jerome some fever reducers while nagging him for always getting sick for almost half the year. Accepting the medicine, Jerome warns him to shut his trap, while Siwoo reminds Jerome that he might not be able to join them to go to the countryside if the fever persists. However, Jerome refuses to let anything stop him from going to the countryside to film their group content. Haesu then teases Jerome, asking if he really wants to show fans the sickly, worn-out version of himself when they're used to seeing his handsome face. Irritated, Jerome immediately fires back and the two fall into another round of bickering while the other two members watch, already exhausted by their endless squabbles. Despite the commotion in the background, Siwoo is deep in thought as he worries about Jerome's health. The following day, Sihyun runs into Jeong at the market and tells him all about the cats he found. Apparently he left the mother cat at the vet, but took the little kittens home. Sihyun tells Jeong that one of the kittens is yellow, while the other two have cow patterns, which makes them so adorable. Jeong notices that Sihyun bought a lot of toys for them, and he also advises him to raise the cats well, as they help take care of bugs and mice around the house. However, Sihyun lets him know that he's not raising the cats to do any work. Just then, Sihyun remembers that he needs to stop by the seed plant shop because Sumin told him that cats love perilla leaves. Jeong is puzzled to hear this, but he finally realizes that Sumin must have meant catnip, which Sihyun confused for perilla leaves. Sihyun is stunned that he actually almost messed it up, while Jeong teases him for the mistake, pointing out that Sihyun might have a tough time caring for kittens. He then suggests they stop by the handmade tofu shop to buy some soy milk for cold soy noodles. Embarrassed, Sihyun quietly follows Jeong while still thinking about his silly mistake. Shortly after, they arrive at the handmade tofu shop where Sihyun happily places his order at the counter. He then notices that the owner of the store is acting strangely, and the whole atmosphere in the room seems off. Sihyun quickly scans through the store just as a suspicious-looking individual steps out of the shop. Sihyun could sense a strange aura emitting from the suspicious dude, but he doesn't understand what it is. After looking around for a bit, the man pulls his cap down to better conceal his face before leaving the store. The shop owner lets out a sigh of relief the moment he's gone. When Jeong asks who the man was, saying he's never seen him around before, the owner lowers his voice as he reveals that the stranger is rumored to be a criminal. Startled, Jeong listens as the owner explains that the suspicious-looking man is said to be a gangster from the city. According to local gossip, he was recently released from prison and has since moved to their quiet village. The news leaves Jeong uneasy, and he can only hope the so-called criminal doesn't bring trouble to their neighborhood. Despite the convincing story, Sihyun finds himself doubting that the boy is truly a criminal. Outside the store, everyone stops to whisper behind the boy's back, leaving him frustrated. Even after returning home, Sihyun continues to think about the boy who is rumored to be a criminal. That same word brought back a very old memory to his mind, which he would rather forget. In his previous life, Sihyun would follow his teacher to visit the prison once a month to reform and cleanse criminals. Even though it was a thankless task, Sihyun still loved tagging along with his teacher, and on one such day, they headed to the Reformation Room for a cleansing ritual. In the Reformation Room, Sihyun saw a criminal who radiated a horribly foul aura, and the stench from his filthy clothes and untreated wounds made things worse. Apparently, this criminal was the priest of a fallen tribe who was arrested for cannibalism and demon worship. Sihyun's master soon began chanting the purification ritual, but just as Sihyun was about to sweep the cleansing branch over his body, the criminal's voice suddenly echoed through the room, saying Sihyun looked very delicious. Unfortunately, before Sihyun could react, the vile-looking criminal sank his fangs into Sihyun's wrist and tried to bite him. It was as if he had been biding his time like a wolf stalking its prey. That wound eventually left an ugly scar on Sihyun's wrist, and because of it, rumors spread that it was the bite mark of a demon. Thanks to this rumor, Sihyun had a really hard time for a long time. Even now, the memory is enough to send goosebumps crawling across his skin. One thing is certain though, and that is the aura of that vicious criminal was nothing like the one he sensed from the so-called criminal who visited the tofu shop. While the hooded man's presence carried a vaguely similar vibe, it didn't have the same sinister energy Sihyun sensed from the criminal from his past life. This leaves Sihyun wondering if he's simply imagining things. Just then, the shrill ring of his phone startles the cats. When he answers, he finds that it's Siwoo calling to let him know that the group is already getting ready to head to his place. Siwoo asks Sihyun to prepare some extra bedding since, besides the band members, a few staff members will also be joining them to film some group content. Sihyun assures him that everything will be ready by the time they arrive and tells him not to worry. Relieved, Siwoo says they should reach the house by the weekend. Sihyun wishes them a safe trip and is about to end the call when Siwoo suddenly remembers to ask him for a favor concerning their sick bandmate, Jerome. Speaking of Siwoo's group, they're called Tracker, a highly popular 5-member idol group. The members consist of Hisu, the main vocalist, Jerome, the main dancer, Leo, the group's leader and main rapper, Kei, the sub-vocalist, and finally, Siwoo, the group's center and lead vocalist. On the day of their journey to the countryside, Hisu happily watches the news talking about their completely sold-out concert and sales for their newest album. Meanwhile, Kei tries to stop an addicted Leo from wasting all his savings on the claw machine without even grabbing anything. On the other hand, Siwoo, who isn't even the group leader, seems to be the only sane one in the group, worrying about everyone. Just then, Siwoo realizes Jerome is missing, and Kei tells him that Jerome had gone to the convenience store a while ago to buy some water. When Siwoo turns to check on him, he notices a small crowd gathering outside. It turns out Jerome has been recognized by fans, all eager to get his autograph, leaving him unable to escape. A moment later, Siwoo rushes over and yanks him away like a kid dragging a toy, scolding him for not wearing a mask in the first place. Jerome apologizes for causing a commotion, explaining that he had still been half asleep when he went to the convenience store and simply forgot. After they scramble into their van, Siwoo urges the road manager to drive off quickly before the fans can catch up. As the van pulls away, Hisu leans out the window to wave at the crowd, calling out for everyone to keep streaming Tracker's music. Siwoo, on the other hand, is relieved that they managed to slip away. Even so, he can't shake the worry that other fans might create a scene in front of his brother. As they near their destination, he gazes out the window at the endless stretch of lush greenery, looking forward to spending some peaceful time in the countryside. Meanwhile, Sihyun is busy pushing forward to build his 8-pack dream even though he is in pain. He considers the pain a required sacrifice for this out-of-shape vessel of his to become whole again. Unlike most people who might not mind a full potbelly, Sihyun considers pain for good health a necessary luxury. As the earth continues to leak natural force, the amount Sihyun could gather increases along with the amount of druid spells he could use. After the exercise, Sihyun opens his eyes to find himself surrounded by his cats and birds. Shortly afterwards, he freshens up, after which he checks the time and figures that Siwoo and his group should be arriving soon. Right on cue, he senses their arrival and rushes out to welcome the group. Siwoo and his bandmates also cheerfully greet Sihyun with their cringy idol group slang, which Sihyun obviously pretends to like. After exchanging greetings, Siwoo rushes forward to properly check on his older brother. Sihyun then asks him how their trip went, and Siwoo laments that his teammates almost drained all his energy before they even left the city. The brothers suddenly pause their conversation when they notice Haesu staring at them intently. This makes Sihyun wonder whether he has something on his face, but Haesu quickly explains that he's just amazed to see his idol in person. This takes Sihyun by surprise because he's supposed to be the one acting starstruck with so many celebrities in front of him. While Siwoo and Haesu chatter on about Sihyun, a production staff member named Kim Hanbyul approaches Sihyun to thank him for letting them film in his yard. Sihyun then lets him know that he doesn't mind as long as they don't disturb the neighbors. Hanbyul then happily thanks Sihyun, informing him that they'll start filming soon. Sihyun then invites everyone inside to unpack before they begin filming their show. With that, the members of Tracker began their countryside adventure, wandering through the vast forest like ordinary young men and enjoying the peace their hectic schedules rarely allowed. They also spent time playing with Sihyun's cats, giving their tired minds and bodies a chance to heal while getting acquainted with the unique pets of nature that called the countryside home. Just like that, the day passed in a flash, and as the sun began to set, the initial bright smiles on everyone's face also began to vanish. After the shoot, Sihyun watches proudly as Siwoo discusses ideas for the final edit of their shoot with the director. He had always known his younger brother was talented, but seeing him confidently lead the discussion fills Sihyun with a deep sense of pride. Just as Sihyun is about to go prepare dinner, he notices an open shopping bag beside some boxes. Realizing the group didn't unpack properly before filming, Sihyun decides to help them take the bags indoors to prevent bugs from getting on them. However, he notices a note attached to the side of the shopping bag, revealing that it's a gift from Siwoo. Sihyun is delighted to discover a new tracksuit inside, especially since he had been thinking about buying one himself. He also finds a receipt tucked inside the clothes, making him realize that Siwoo had purchased them brand new, rather than giving him an old tracksuit as the note claimed. Touched by the thoughtful gesture, Sihyun can't help but feel that the experience is strangely unfamiliar. As a druid, he's always been the one caring for countless living things, not the one being cared for. Even so, he finds that this unfamiliar feeling isn't unpleasant at all. Unable to contain his growing happiness, Sihyun happily shows off his new gift to his cats, proudly telling them it was from his little brother. Soon afterward, the group wraps up their final shoot for the night. Already exhausted, Leo praises everyone for working hard and making it through the day. Siwoo grumbles that he's starving, while Kay jokingly blames Jerome for wearing everyone out. Jerome, who looks even more exhausted than the rest, quietly apologizes for causing trouble. However, before he can finish, his illness catches up with him. He had forced himself to endure until the end of the shoot, but pushing past his limits only made his condition worse. His vision begins to blur, and he nearly loses consciousness while still worrying about how he'll make it through tomorrow's filming. Just as he's about to black out, the frantic voices of his teammates calling his name pull him to reality. Hisu quickly asks if he's alright, but Jerome insists that he's fine, despite looking awful. As the group gathers around him in concern, Sihyun rushes over after hearing the commotion. Hisu then tells Sihyun that Jerome is sick and has always had a weak constitution. After examining him, Sihyun realizes that Jerome's life force has been completely depleted. Siwoo then reminds Sihyun about the favor he asked of him earlier, and with a reassuring smile, Sihyun says he'll be right back to prepare it. A few minutes later, he returns carrying a steaming cup of tea and offers it to a confused Jerome. When Jerome hesitates, Sihyun gently encourages him to drink it, and Jerome finally accepts the cup, only to be surprised when he realizes it's filled with herbal tea. Jerome assumes that it is just a normal herbal tea, and as he drinks it, he feels bad for Sihyun because he believes that it is not even going to do anything for his stubborn body. However, everything he believes in immediately changes the moment the tea touches his tongue, and he feels the sweetness of the herbal tea as if he were drinking honey. Sihyun casually asks him how he feels about the tea, and he excitedly replies that he has never had a tea as delicious as the one Sihyun gave him before. Seeing how Jerome is reacting to the tea, Siwoo urges him to chill out, reminding him that it is just tea. He then decides to try some, and after taking a sip of the tea, he gives his review, revealing that it is bitter. Sihyun then tells him that it tastes bitter to him because the tea's taste changes depending on his condition. Jerome is completely blown away because his headache has vanished and his vision appears to be even better than before. The manager walks up to him, asking him if he would like to sleep, but Jerome tells him that he is feeling so hyped that he can even undergo another shoot. The whole crew hears this and is left completely speechless. The manager wonders how he is in peak condition when he hasn't even taken his medicine that day. The manager soon figures out that Jerome is feeling really good thanks to the herbal tea, and he wastes no time grabbing Sihyun and asking him where he got the tea. Sihyun calmly replies that he grew it himself and it is not for sale. With a red and serious face, the manager asks him if he will be willing to sell some to them, assuring him that they are ready to pay whatever price he demands. Basically, things made by druids can either be poison or medicine, which is why people do not buy things recklessly in ancient Britannia. Sihyun knows that even in modern times, there must be people who deceive others to sell harmful things. With the way the manager is reacting, Sihyun realizes that he really cares for the team. Sihyun then agrees to make some for the team the next morning, and this makes the manager the happiest person in the world. The manager mentions that he has always been worried about Jerome because he has had a weak constitution since he joined the agency. With tears rolling down his face, the manager says he is really emotional to see how energetic Jerome is. The whole team then rallied around Jerome to comfort him, while Sihyun suggested that they finish everything up the next day, since it is getting late already. The next morning, Jerome wakes up after a sound sleep, which is something he doesn't get to enjoy because even the slightest noise wakes him. He gets up to see that he is the only one still in bed, and when he walks out, he finds the team taking garden lessons from Sihyun. Just then, they notice that Jerome is awake, and Siwoo expresses his relief that he is finally back to life after sleeping like a dead man. Jerome himself tells Siwoo that he's surprised, and he attributes this to the herbal tea that Sihyun gave him. Siwoo then tells Jerome that it is why he came to him. Apparently, Sihyun had made another cup of herbal tea, which he told Siwoo to give Jerome. He urges him to drink it while it is still hot, and Jerome excitedly collects the cup, saying he has to thank Sihyun properly later. Meanwhile, Sihyun is watching from a distance, and seeing how relaxed Jerome is, he is glad that the medication is working well. Apparently, Jerome was living by burning through his life force because he lacked nature force. This also reminded Sihyun of a young child from the long-term tribe he had met when he was a druid. The child suffered the same symptoms as Jerome, and after examination, his teacher even told his parents that there was no hope for the child. They basically tried everything, but they couldn't find a cure for the problem. All Yahello could do back then was channel a little bit of nature force at a time, hoping that it would ease the boy's pain even a little. However, nothing worked, and in the end, the boy died. Nonetheless, Yahello made sure to stay by his side until the very end. Now that he is seeing the same signs in Jerome, Sihyun is worried for him. However, he has hope in the fact that the mountains and fields of the modern world are overflowing with elixirs rich in nature force, unlike the barren lands of Britannia. Sihyun is determined to make things different this time around because he can't bear the pain of watching someone die helplessly again. This is why he sat down to curate a rich and wonderful tea just for Jerome to help him. After taking the tea, Siwoo and the others notice a drastic change in Jerome's behavior, leaving them in awe. Jerome is so active that he even has the time to play with birds, and Siwoo immediately whips out his phone to take a picture of the rare moment. After they are done messing around, they come together for the day's stream. On the stream, Haesu eats tomatoes, and he uses the opportunity to promote Sihyun, revealing that he was the one who grew the tomatoes. Haesu and Kei still make sure to bring up their shenanigans during the stream, until Siwoo takes the camera away to show everyone their lively band member, Jerome. The viewers are pumped to see him back in action, and they urge him to stay healthy as much as he can. They are in the middle of this when Haesu notices something and he calls his friends' attention to it. They all turn around to see Sihyun playing with birds, and they are landing on him with no sense of fear whatsoever. Leo uses the opportunity to tell the viewers that the person they are looking at is Siwoo's brother, Sihyun, and he has been helping them with their content. As if things are not hectic enough, everything descends into complete chaos when Bangle appears on the scene, leaving the entire team raving because they have always wanted to meet the water deer superstar, Bangle.